Jesse Temple is here. Badger Connect. Subscribe to his work. The written work is outstanding. The podcast is good. And the video content, the Badger Bites, top notch. It's the only content of its kind. That's where you can find it. And of course, he's on the camp with Zach. They're cranking out episodes at breakneck pace. It's funny, Jesse. The thing that was on the top of my list to ask you about is something that you tweeted about within the last 10 minutes. Eugene Hilton Jr. Rave reviews. So I will ask you, is he the type of player, do you see in him the type of player who can be a number one wide receiver in a good competitive Big Ten offense this year? Is he that good, or is it just he's showing promise and stacking some nice practices?
Well, it's still early and he's in his second year as a college player, but my response would be, heck yes, I do. He's been
Nice.
he's the most talented wide receiver in the room, and Zach and I have been talking about this since last spring when he came in 2 springs ago. He came in as a freshman early enrollee and was making plays, and granted, those plays were with the third stringers often. You throw the ball in his general direction, his catch radius is outstanding. If you're a quarterback, you have to feel good about your chances. And he's been the most consistent wide receiver this fall. I wrote about some takeaways through the first 4 preseason practices for a story that published on Badger Connect Monday. And I said that he had stood out most to me, him and Tyrell Henry, but he's just made really big leaps. And today he was outstanding. He might have had a half dozen touchdowns. And I know some of them are in the red zone and all those types of things, but he got behind the defense and Colton Joseph just threw a beautiful ball off play action for a 40-yard touchdown. He had a catch in the end zone against Javon Robinson that was contested, and Robinson is undeniably the starting corner, one of them on the outside. They got the ball to him in some different ways so he could run it and he was able to score. They did some one-on-one drills, so it was just you're in the red zone, quarterback's throwing the ball, you're matched up against a DB, go make a play. And while the offense should have the advantage, they didn't always win, but he won. And so there's just so much to like about his game, his savviness, his route running. Obviously, his dad, T.Y., was a great NFL player, and he learned from him. And so when I saw that he came back from being in the transfer portal last offseason, it felt like one of the biggest wins Wisconsin could have from the transfer portal or otherwise at that stage.
You mentioned Tyrell Henry, Jalen Domingo from Southern Louisiana, another player. Hilton, do you notice throughout fall camp so far, and I know we've only been at it for, a week, maybe a little bit less, do you see some chemistry and some things between them and their quarterback? Do you see that kind of developing? Because that's got to happen really fast now in college football with guys changing teams all the time.
Yeah, I think so. I never was a quarterback or a wide receiver, so I can't speak to what the chemistry is like. But if the quarterback's going to put the ball in your area, you go catch it. And I think one thing about Hilton is he's done it with all 3 of the top quarterbacks. And so it's not just Colton Joseph, it's reps he's gotten with Deuce Adams and Ryan Hopkins as well. I certainly think Deuce is putting himself in position to potentially be a number one. And again, it's still very early, but that was one of the discussions and talking points in the spring is doesn't really feel like Wisconsin has a true number one now. Jalen DiMaggio really stood out in the spring scrimmage, and it felt like he was emerging. I don't know that I've seen a ton of big plays from him or that he's been stacking days in the way that Hilton has, but he's going to be a part of the rotation on the outside. Chris Brooks Jr. as well, who's a really good blocker. And then can they have perhaps a 5th guy emerge? But certainly I think that Hilton is capable of being a number one. And there have been some good plays, though I would also say that it's not like they're dialing up a lot of 40-yard shots in practice. I'd say the majority of passes are probably 10 yards and under as they're installing everything and working on the run game. So some encouraging signs, though, from Hilton.
It's funny because, Jeff Grimes is a more traditional kind of Wisconsin type offensive coordinator, running game to set up the pass, play action. But when you listen to Colton Joseph, and I don't remember if it was with an availability that you guys had or Big Ten Network, it all starts to run together. He was asked, to describe this offense, explosive. Like there's a lot of talk of some of these players, big plays, pushing the ball down the field. Is that something that you've noticed and maybe something that Jeff Grimes is trying to emphasize here in his second year? Or is that just a player, being excited about his offense and,
Well, so I think they're capable of it. Again, I referenced that 40-yard touchdown pass that he had. That's pretty darn explosive. But do I think that's the bulk of the offense? Absolutely not. It's a very different offense from the Phil Longo type of offense, which we know didn't work in 2 seasons at Wisconsin. I think a lot of it is going to be predicated on the run. I also think they're going to actively involve the wide receivers, getting them the ball so they can get out in open space on the run. But if you can succeed and if the O-line can establish some holes, it's going to suck the defense up so that you're baited by that play action pass. And so that's absolutely part of the offense. I don't know that I'm ready to proclaim that this is an explosive offense. And I know he said we're going to score a lot of touchdowns. That's always the hope. Hope
Yeah.
springs eternal this time of year. But if they can establish some things up front, they'll clearly be in a much better position to succeed down the field.
Lastly, kind of on this Eugene Hilton thing, I can't remember if it was when I was talking with Zach or you. It's probably come up with both of us. I think in all of our discussions about what's been wrong with the program the last couple of years or areas in which they've come up short, you and Zach have both pointed out, like, hey, just by the way, we're talking about this, that, and the other thing. They just haven't had enough high level dudes, explosive playmakers, guys who can kind of take over a play and make something happen by themselves. Is Eugene Hilton consistently flashing? Is he maybe one of the guys who you look at and say, yeah, they've been missing guys like that the last couple of years? Does he qualify?
Man, it's really tough to say. When they had Will Pauling, especially in his first year, he made an abundance of catches. And granted, Longo loved to utilize slot receivers in that way. He's got an extremely high ceiling. I'll say that. He's also a guy who had 9 receptions last season. And certainly a lot of that had to do with not only opportunities, but also who's trying to get you the ball. You got 4 quarterbacks and it's a turnstile. You're having a lot of problems. You can't run the ball. You're averaging 3.3 yards per carry. But I just really like what he has to offer and felt even last year that he was one of the most talented receivers in the room. But it seems clear that he's made a very big jump. And so, again, for Wisconsin to bring him back for a second year could end up paying big dividends.
Jesse Temple is here. Find his work, subscribe to Badger Connect. So you guys talked with Eric Mateos yesterday, the offensive line coach. It's the one time of the year you're going to get him. Basically, that's what Zach was describing to me. Or this is not something that you get to do a lot. This is kind of an introduction to him and what he thinks. Before we get into the specifics of what he said, I have a question or two. You've been around a lot of coaches. They talk, they're interesting characters. Sniffing through, some of the coachisms and are you buying what he's selling?
Yeah, I mean, look, he mixes humor and intensity, which is what I wrote about off that availability and just watching the O line in general. The intensity has certainly stood out here early on in the preseason. He's having these dudes do up downs, especially the last couple practices, for all kinds of mistakes. There, you look over and you see the O line group; they're constantly on the ground, getting back up, and it's probably one thing if you're a jacked up wide receiver, and another thing if you're a 330-pound O lineman to have to thud on the ground and get back up. But he wants to hold them accountable, and he basically, I mean, he didn't say it's hell week, but that's what practices 5 through 8 are. It's separating the guys, the men from the boys, if you will. Like, you think it's hard now? Great. I'm not going to be out there when it's September 6th and you're playing against Notre Dame. So I want it to be so hard now that when you get to a game, you understand the expectations. But then there is the other side of him that's super humorous. Am I buying it? Look, what he said when we first talked to him after he got hired, I asked him, why is this going to work? I said, you're the third O-line coach under Luke Fickell. Luke fired the other two. And he said, not to be full of bravado, but what he said is, I haven't failed anywhere yet. Now, he didn't last at Arkansas because there was some staff turnover, but he felt like they had a really solid offensive line. He has had rebuilding projects before, and he actually compared coming to Wisconsin to what it was like at Baylor. Now, Jeff Grimes was the offensive coordinator then. They were 120-something in rushing offense before Mateos got there, and in his first year, they were 10th in rushing offense. Well, Wisconsin's rushing offense last year was like 116th. So, but he's got a lot of work to do. And I think that that's the key thing here. That's my biggest question about any position group is, will the offensive line be ready? Will there be enough top level bodies to be effective? Because that's always a concern. And we'll see whether he can get it done.
Let's reverse engineer this. Why do you think the last 2 offensive line coaches under Luke Fickell didn't work? And the results haven't been good. But to you, looking critically, was there were they not developing the talent that Luke Fickell thought they had? Was it a scheme? Was it what do you think went wrong with the last 2?
Well, at least based on talking to players, I don't think they particularly liked how Jack McNeil Jr. coached them. Now, granted, he was part of the offense under Phil Longo at North Carolina, and that was an offense that was just totally different from what the O-linemen knew and the way they were blocking and the landmarks that they were aiming for instead of just going and destroying somebody. So it was very clear that wasn't working, but ultimately the Phil Longo experiment didn't work either. The AJ Blazek one is interesting. I think he's a good coach. I think he's very personable, and I'm not sure exactly what happened that led them to feel like they needed to do something totally different, because I felt like he recruited well. You look at some of the recruiting classes they brought in, he was responsible for them. But I'd also say that he wasn't Jeff Grimes' guy. And there's something to be said for that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, just like it didn't under Longo. But Grimes and Mateos have had a history of success. I mentioned Baylor before. They were at BYU together. They've been at multiple schools. And so there was an opportunity because Mateos wasn't going to stay at Arkansas. So that may have had part to do with this too. If you're the offensive coordinator, you want some people you can trust who you've worked with in the trenches before.
Fit, right? Like I could probably boil it down as a dummy who hasn't played football. There's a lot of ways that you can coach a line that probably works. It's about coaching it the right way to fit the offense and the players that's been. So hopefully Fit now aligned with OC and the offensive line coach. Intense guy. Kate was in here last night, did a little report and gave her reaction to things. I've also heard from practices so far, there's fighting is a strong word, skirmishes, chirping. Like, has this been a more aggressive, vocal, snarky fall camp so far than maybe the ones you were used to in the past? Has that stood out to you?
Honestly, I don't. I know that that's been a storyline. I don't make that big of a deal of it. I also can't remember every camp from year to year. Now, are there some dudes who are willing to talk some smack? Yeah, I like that about this group. Mason Posta is getting into it with everybody. It's funny. So there was a sequence in practice the other day, and Mateos was not thrilled with his entire offensive line group and was talking to him. And Posta came back from the sideline and was heading back toward the field and started talking some smack, and they were kind of going at it because Posta is very confident in himself and thinks that he and his defense can get the job done. And there's a lot of times where I see him and Colton Joseph kind of talking to each other. So you like that. You like that kind of alpha dog personality. And maybe some people see that and think, well, there's a different attitude. In terms of the skirmishes, look, if you're going against the same dude every day in 86-degree heat for 21 days out of 25 or whatever, you're probably going to want to hit somebody after the whistle. And we see that every year, I feel like. So I'm not going to make too much of that. But I guess if you're looking for a silver lining, maybe there is a shift in attitude or a feeling like we have the ability to dominate. But we'll see whether it translates on game days.
Sounds like Mason Posta loves to talk, and it sounds
Oh,
like he's a little crazy, and maybe it's a wrestler linebacker thing where it's like, if me talking trash right now leads you to hitting me late on a play, like I don't think that bothers him. I think that would get him weirdly fired up in a way. Like, I don't think it's just talking I think he wants to get people pissed off to hit him. And I think he's welcoming all of this. He sounds a little crazy in a good way, I think, for football.
I mean, he's a different kind of dude, but that's the type of personality that people feed off. You saw what he was able to accomplish last year. Now, it doesn't mean it's the only way to do it because Cooper Catalano is a different personality and gets it done in his own way. But I remember the story from writing about Posa coming out of high school. He won wrestling state titles every year in New Mexico in different weight classes. And in his senior year, he won in the heavyweight division because I think something happened to their heavyweight wrestler. And Mason was like, well, just throw me in there. We can get points. He was
Sure.
60 pounds underweight for the heavyweight division and kicked everyone's butt anyway. So that's who
Yeah.
Mason Posa is.
Just throw me in there. We can get some points.
Yeah.
I love wrestlers, man. They're crazy. So your latest Badger Bite, we can rack up with this. This one I think is very instructive for people who want to know more about the football program specifically. You do some great things with other sports, especially when it includes you putting on the pads or doing the activity. This one, if you just want to get to know Morocco Brown, the new GM, and kind of his vision for how Wisconsin football is going to be manned and operated moving forward, this is pretty instructive, it seems.
Yeah, it's a 20-plus minute one-on-one with the new general manager. Morocco Brown was brought in this summer, and we talk about his path. He has 25 years in NFL front offices across 4 teams, spent a large chunk of that with the Indianapolis Colts and had a relationship with Chris Ballard, who's not only the Colts GM, but a former Badgers player. And we also talk about how that experience will shape and inform his decision-making at Wisconsin and really what the objectives are. General manager is not a role that existed 8 years ago in college athletics. You need one now in this era where you're paying players and you have to figure out how do you slot them in? How do you determine their value? How do you scout? And so I think his experience will be really important for Wisconsin. So check it out at Badger Connect right now.
I have the Badger Bite rolling in front of me. 2 very well-kept, sharply dressed, confident, capable-looking men in this conversation. I haven't watched the full thing yet, but I look forward to doing it. Jesse, appreciate your time, and we will look for more of your coverage at Badger Connect from fall camp. And, of course, we love hearing you on the camp with Zach as well.
Thank you, Grant. Talk soon.